Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul. Welcome to this week's episode of the Joy of Cruising podcast. I am so excited. First of all, the new book, The Joy of Cruising Again, is out and available to order. Our guest today, our famous guest today, actually wrote the quote on the front cover of the book. In the Joy of Cruising books, all the passionate cruisers I write about are special, whether they are ordinary cruisers with extraordinary stories or Googleable individuals such as TV personalities, Grammy winners and nominees, a Hall of Famer, UK's first non-royal, non-celebrity cruise ship Godmother. Today, I am honored to welcome one of those Googleable individuals, Joseph Farcus, a veritable legend of cruise ship design and author of the book, Design on the High Seas. I featured Joe in my new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, in a section called The Fun Ships. Perhaps some at Carnival may argue with me, but I don't believe there's anyone who epitomizes the slogan, The Fun Ships, more than Joe. Joe's entry into the world of cruising was in 1975, when the architectural firm he worked for, Morris Lapidus Associates, was engaged by Carnival Cruise Line to work on its second former liner to add to its Mardi Gras. Morris Lapidus, who's renowned for its design of Miami's famed Fontainebleau Hotel, was commissioned to design the ship, which was renamed Carnivale, for its transformation into a cruise ship. Joe oversaw much of the work as the project manager on board at the shipyard and designed Carnivale's theater. By the time Carnival purchased its third ship, a passenger cargo ship that would become the Festivale, Joe had left Morris Lapidus. Joe approached Ted Arison, founder and CEO of Carnival, in an effort to obtain his first contract as an independent architect. Joe eventually got the contract to design Festivale, and it was a massive success, positioning the fun ships to launch their first build of a new ship, the Tropicale. Joe landed the contract to design the Tropicale and went on to design the next 30 Carnival ships. In 2000, he also began designing for Costa Cruises, Carnival's Italian subsidiary, and designed 11 ships for them. Joe's last ship, where he led the design for a Carnival ship, was the Magic in 2011, and he designed the Costa Diadema in 2014 before retiring later that year. Welcome, Joe, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here and see you and chat about one of my favorite subjects.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We just came up to our summer place in North Carolina and taking that all in and really enjoying it. The weather's beautiful now, and it's, we just look forward to the next few months.
I tried to fit a lot of info into that introduction of you, but your career has been so amazing and jam-packed, sometimes designing 2 and 3 ships in a single year.
Yeah, sometimes 4.
4, yeah. So I just couldn't do it justice. So take us back, starting with your work for Carnival on Carnivale, and then your first contract with Carnival Cruise Line on Festivale, which was a game changer for them.
Well, it's as you were saying, it's just an amazing story, and I can't believe my luck and that I was falling into this situation that so well suited me, and was able to carry that on for 40 years plus. It's just an amazing story. I was always interested in ships since I was a kid. In fact, the first book I bought was a book called How to Draw Merchant Ships when I was about 15 or 16 years old. And again, I've just been interested in pretty much all my life. And then all of a sudden, I was into it, and I was prepared and just enjoyed it, and that continued for 40 some years. I was working for this architect, Morris Lapidus, who was famous for designing hotels, particularly the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. And I went to work for him right after I graduated architectural school from the University of Florida, and was a designer, and then became his chief designer, architectural designer, not interior designer. And during that period, Ted Arison had bought what was to be the second ship for Carnival Cruise Lines, the TSS Carnivale. It was a former, actually, it was a Greek line ship, but it was built as a Canadian Pacific ship. At that time, which was about 1975, I believe, there was a recession going on, and it particularly hit the architectural offices very hard. And when our office was maybe at its highest point about 75 people, we were down to about 10, and very few of those people were on the draft. Ted Arison knew Morris Lapidus, I'm not sure exactly how, and he invited him to come down and look, or talk about doing the renovation or refit of the Carnival. And he normally, if there was something to go see, Morris Lapidus went, but he was ill. So he sent me to Greece to see the ship, which was laid up on the island of Salamis. I had to go out and get a passport. I mean, I'd been to the Bahamas, but never, certainly never across the ocean. Flew to Greece and stayed in Athens. That was an adventure and a story for another time. And worked with met Captain Fabieri. He was going to be the captain of the ship, and came to this forlorn-looking ship amongst a lot of forlorn-looking ships listing this way and that. And it was freezing cold. It was November, and we went aboard, and everybody had their task to go through the ship and do their evaluation. And that's what I did from the architectural point of view. I went to the chart house and was able to find some plans of the ship, GA layouts, and gathered a lot of data. And I, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, this is going to be a luxury cruise ship. Because it was what looked like on the outside, it was forlorn. It was even more forlorn on the inside. Got the information that I needed and flew back to Miami. This was around Thanksgiving, so it was late November. And the ship was going to arrive in Miami on New Year's Day. And then it had to, I think by the end of January, had to sail up to Newport News for dry docking and then back again. So whatever was going to be done to the ship really had to be done basically in a 4 or 5 week period, which doesn't even seem possible. And since there was a recession and nothing else to work on, I became the project manager for doing the job. And unlike normal architecture, I was sort of a contractor. I was on the ship day in and day out and arranging to get people to do work for various things. And then design-wise, I was able to design a showroom. Part of Carnival's program was to have some sort of stage variety show of various sorts, and they needed a room for it. On the Mardi Gras, they used this room that was a ballroom, grand ballroom on the Mardi Gras, which was their first ship, and actually a sister to the Carnival, also a Canadian Pacific ship. It wasn't really a great show lounge because if you weren't sitting in the front, you didn't see anything because the floors were flat. So there was no angle giving you good sight lines to the stage. So we were able to use what the Greek line called a discotheque, which was a room that was added to the stern of the ship. And because of the shear in the layout, meaning the curvature of the deck, concave looking down, the aft end of the room was higher than the fore end. So it sort of gave you a natural ability to have some sight lines. So I capitalized on that and created a stage, and there was no height there. So I had to take the ceiling out over the stage so the performers wouldn't hit their head on the ceiling, and put in stage lighting and some sort of sound system and try to make as professional a showroom as I could. And it worked out very, very well. And the Carnivale became a big success. It's where I really got to know Ted Arison. I mean, some of the highlights of the work that I did was, in those days, there was only land phone lines, and we had one phone on the entire ship, and it was on the bridge. And it was a thin wire going from somewhere to this phone. Well, sure enough, someone came along and broke the wire. So we had no communication. So I had to go out in the dock, find the ends of the wire, strip them down, reconnect them. So we had a phone. So that was something. And then the last job I did was the night before I was supposed to leave, we were putting new carpets in all the public rooms. And when they pull up the old carpet, the deck compound, which smooths out the deck from the steel, was all ripped to shreds. So it had to be compounded, which is, sort of they put a cement coating down to create a nice flat surface. And tables and bar stools were bolted to the deck, and they had to come out to do this work and put on the installation. Well, sure enough, where the bar stools were, they just put this compound right over the holes for the bolts. And I had to get a screwdriver and a hammer and sort of explored to find the holes so that the bar stools could be bolted down. And that took a few hours and stayed up all night. And then ultimately left for dry dock and came back, and we finished it up miraculously. And it was, for its day, it was kind of interesting. And it proved to be a big success.
Mm-hmm. Now, I asked you this probably a million times when I was interviewing you for the book, but for the benefit of the listeners, tell them what a GA is, because you've used that acronym a couple of times.
It's GAP, and I've said it so many times, and people in the industry just call it a GA, but what it stands for is General Arrangement Plan. And if you were dealing with a building, a hotel, let's say, you would call it the floor plan, but it's not a building, so it has a in the shipbuilding industry, it's called a general arrangement plan. So that, and that's everything, by the way. I mean, you need a good layout of all the public rooms and the access way for people to find the public rooms, to get to their cabins, for service people to get from the pantries or the galley and whatever, to be able to give good service. So if you have problems in your general arrangement plan, and this didn't really apply so much to the Carnivale. Later on, when we were building new ships, it meant everything. Because if you make a mistake in a layout like that mistake generally runs for the whole life of the ship. So and no matter how beautiful it is and how well you decorate it and so forth, you're sort of fighting with one hand tied behind you. So anyways, so the ship became, was very successful, and I began to, I enjoyed the life. It was great. It was great working with, all the people. Most of the work was done by the crew, and working with the Italians. And when we were in Greece, we would only get together at lunchtime, and we'd go to the officers' mess, and these Italians would bring out baskets and red checker tablecloths and pull out wine and cheese and cold cuts and tuna, and it was just an amazing experience for me. The Carnival became, very, very, very successful, as I said. Passengers loved it, crew loved it. So it, just started the curve of the progress and success of Carnival Cruise Lines, just going up and up and up. Mm-hmm. Good for me is that I really got to know Ted Arison, and more importantly, he got to know me, and my capabilities were, and my, not just my ambition, but my ability to get it done. I'm sort of a hands-on guy. Come from a blue collar background, and the important thing is to get the job done and get it done right. And Ted learned that about me. Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to Carnival's third ship.
During the time of we were doing the Carnivale, I had a falling out with Morris Lapidus. It had to do with money and what was promised to me and things like that, which is a boring story, and I won't get into that. But since that was there over my head, so to speak, it gave me the impetus to speak to Ted and tell him that I had heard, and which I had heard, that Carnival was thinking about buying a third ship, a used ship. And I said, I'm leaving Morris Lapidus, told him, and I want to open my own office. But I need work. I wasn't a rich guy and didn't have, anything background. I didn't have any client lists, so to speak, or potential client lists to do anything of any importance other than, adding a room to somebody's house or very small jobs. And I told him, and I said, well, give me a chance. And sure enough, a few weeks later, Ted called me and said, we're going to have some meetings internal meetings with our top people to discuss whether we're going to buy this ship, which was the S.A. Val, or and if we buy it, what can we do to it to make it a great cruise ship? And he said, I would like you to come to this meeting. I'll pay you for your time, but I'm not giving you any guarantees. Ted was sick at the time, and we had all the meetings in his apartment. GA plans were put out, and everyone looked at it, and there are people from the restaurant, people from the bars, people from engineering, and so forth. So everyone had their input, but I was the guy to talk about layout and things like that. The ship needed public rooms added to it because it was a passenger freighter, because it was built for trade between England and South Africa. It even had wine tanks that they filled up in South Africa with bulk wine and brought it to England, and cargo holds and cargo hatches and so forth, which of course had no place on a cruise ship. So the meeting ended at the end of the day, and the big questions were, what are we going to do in the restaurant to feed people, and what are we going to do for a theater to entertain? So I said, okay, let me take these GA plans home, and I'll work on them tonight. When we come back in the morning, I'll bring back some ideas of what can be done. So I stayed up all night, worked on it, produced interior layout of the theater and of the main restaurant, drew renderings of it so people could visualize what the space was going to be. By the time it was time to go back to Ted's apartment for the next day's meeting, I was able to roll up completed drawings and bring them to the meeting. And when I unrolled them and everyone saw them, and Ted especially, they liked it. And ultimately, those renderings and designs that I did were just completed after I got the job, and the ship was done. That all went well. Ted was impressed, I think, and he just had faith, and he took a chance. He was gambling all his money on what I was going to do for him and for them and for Carnival. And he just had the faith. And so a week or two later, he called me up. Joe, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you the job. Now you have to be in Monte Carlo, and that's where his business office, shall we say, was located. And I gave it a shot. I was drawing on the airplane, drawing at the hotel, and by the time I got to the meeting in about 2 weeks, it was just crazy. But man, a few shipyards, an Italian shipyard, I think a British shipyard, German shipyard, and then all of a sudden there was this meeting with these two Japanese guys. And these two Japanese guys didn't even work for shipyard. They didn't know anything about ships, nothing. Wanted to find out the particulars of what this project was all about. And we gave it to them, and I'm sure Ted gave them all the financial information they needed. And lo and behold, they came up with such a good deal to do the ship that he gave the contract to them. Now, the price was good because the Japanese had seen that cruising was on its way up. And they were a huge shipbuilder, but they didn't build cruise ships. So they wanted, they looked at this as a learning experience, and therefore gave a good price to do the ship. So they got it. I continued designs. We did the job in Japan. I was there for 2 months, which is the basic fitting out process of building the steel work that needed to go on, the extra public rooms that had to be built off the ship and then lowered into place, which was an amazing experience for me to see heavy industry at work. And then all of the interiors that I had designed and met with the various subcontractors were built in the shop, so that when the ship got there, they took all these panels that they had built and brought in and assembled the room. So, on one day, the room would be nothing but steel and wires hanging down. And then a few days later, all the walls would be there, finished walls, decorative. And it was an amazing experience. And that's where Ted began to use me to negotiate with the shipyards. He was one of his genius qualities was to trust people. If he put someone in a position of importance and decision making, he had the trust to go with you. He didn't micromanage and I don't like blue, I'd rather have it green or something like that. And from silly things like that to everything. And that continued throughout my entire career with Carnival, and then the people, their cruise lines that I did work with, all part of Carnival Corporation. And that ship, when it was finally done, that ship soared in popular. I mean, that ship became, in my view, it's the first modern cruise ship. It's a ship designed where the ship is the destination and you provide everything on board for the passengers, or guests as I call them, enjoy the ship. In fact, you don't have to get off the ship to have a good time. But the ports of call were like icing on the cake. And they paid these ships, the money they borrowed on these ships off, practically within months, maybe a year or two, which didn't make the banks happy, but it was just a vision of Ted Arison, and he knocked the ball out of the park in that respect. I think we all did. When that ship was finished and we were in Japan, I was walking down the street with Ted after the ship was delivered after dinner one night, and he told me, "Joe, I'm thinking about building a new ship, a brand new cruise ship, from the keel up." And I said, "Wow, that's great, fantastic. I'm assuming that I'll get that ship and we'll be able to, do it." And he said, "However, it means I have to risk everything I've made so far on this ship. And if it doesn't work out, it's practically bankruptcy for him." And being the honest person I am and the non-businessman entrepreneur, I said, I wouldn't do it. But of course, Ted was Ted, and he did it. And that became my first new ship, because he did give me the job. It was supposed to be built in Japan, but it ended up being built in Denmark. So my European adventure in shipyards and cruise ship building continued on that basis.
Tropicale was not only Carnival's first new build, but perhaps just as significant, it was the debut of Carnival's iconic winged funnel, or some people call it the whale's tail, that became a brand mark that was adapted for every subsequent Carnival build to the present time. Joe, talk about the genesis of the idea of the winged funnel and then the execution of it on Tropicale.
Sure. Also, a great story. I have to digress a bit to the first cruise of the Carnivale, which Ted graciously invited me to go on. And of course, I accepted and wanted to go on, but I thought to myself, do I want to do this? I'm going to be on this contained ship. I'm going to get bored. Is this something I really want to do? And that feeling served me well, because I always took that position when starting out to design a new cruise ship, that you're designing for people who think just that way, that you want to blow them out of that nightmarish type feeling into something exciting. So anyway, back on the cruise ship, one night after dinner, I was walking with Ted on the upper deck, and we stopped on the railing just under the funnel. Ship was at sea. It was belching out smoke, and it was very standard, typical funnel that you would see on almost any kind. And we're both looking up at it, and Ted says to me, the funnel is not just for looks and for giving a physical form to the brand company that owns it, but it has to be technically designed in a way that carries the smoke that comes out of the funnel away from the ship, because in that smoke, it's not some benign puffy stuff. There's little droplets of fuel oil in it, and when it gets on the deck, it creates a mess that always has to be cleaned up. So it would behoove you to design a funnel that never happens on. And I understood, and I put that in my pocket. Then comes the Tropicale, and it's time to create a funnel for that ship. The GA had been settled. Ted he wanted something distinctive, something that people would look at and say Carnival Cruise. He had naval architects working on it, and nothing pleased him. So he said to me, "Joe, why don't you take a shot at designing it?" "Oh, okay, sure." I went back to that conversation on the Carnivale and thought about that necessity of designing something that would take the smoke away from the ship rather than settling on the decks and making a mess. I knew a little bit about airplanes, and I knew that airplanes fly because of a phenomenon called lift, which creates basically the shape of the wing creates a vacuum at the top edge of the wing, and that's what keeps the plane in the air. So I thought, well, gee, maybe that principle would work on solving this issue of keeping the smoke off the ship. So I decided to design a funnel that had wings on it, and that the wings would have an aerodynamic shape as you would see on an airplane. In other words, the bottom would be more or less flat, and the top of the wing would be a curved surface. That's how it works. So I began sketching something like that. At the time I started sketching, I was in Japan having a meeting, and the meeting was centered around what type of engines they have. Diesel engines, steam turbines, and so forth, which is not my expertise. So I sat down and began sketching. I made a model of it, physical model of it, maybe 7 or 8 inches high, and I painted it in the Carnival livery. And Ted had a birthday party, a surprise party, and I gave him the model as a present. Well, he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And so we put it in on the GAP and went out for bids. And ultimately, the Aalborg Werft in Denmark, Aalborg, won the contract. And we went there to begin working with the shipyard to develop the interiors and everything else. The head of the shipyard approached Ted, and he said, we're going to build this funnel as Joe has designed it. And he said, but, it's very expensive and it's not going to work. It's going to be just terrible. Why don't you let us give you a real naval architect design smokestack, and we'll give you a good credit for, going from the wing funnel to this straight chimney. So Ted, being a businessman, he said, well, okay, but let's build, when we do the wind tunnel tests on the ship, which is one way they tell what the smoke is going to do. They put a good sized model of the ship, maybe 4 or 5 feet long, built completely to scale with a funnel on it, with little pipes in it that blows out smoke as it would be in the real one. And then they tested on all sorts of wind conditions, straight on, coming from the side, following wind, and so forth, to see how the smoke comes out in every wind condition. Well, I went to see that test in Copenhagen at the laboratory, and my funnel won hands down. So in the conversation, the wing funnel became a reality, and I loved it.
Then you designed the Holiday, which Carnival launched in 1985, which began a run of virtually annual new ships designed by you and launched by Carnival until the last ship you fully designed, which was the Magic in 2011. Talk about some of the highlights of that amazing period of time.
Well, wow. You could write a book. In fact, I did write a book about that story. It was a great adventure for me. And the best part of the adventure, I would say, is the fact that in my design personality or philosophy, I always wanted to do something different. I never wanted to sit back and say, oh, well, this was successful, so we'll just do a variation of that on the next one. No, I wanted every ship to have its own personality. Now, the GA was generally the same for the various classes of ships, but the interiors were done in a completely different. And I love that challenge. To always be creative. It was a little scary because having just done a ship that was delivered and was very successful, especially in the early days, like the Holiday and the Jubilee and Celebration. So the interiors of the ship were done. Ship was delivered. The press saw it. The passengers were on board, and it was very successful. And I would think to myself when I was starting out designing the next ship, well, this was so successful that do I want to risk and change something? But it wasn't in me to repeat. So it was that question was a non-starter, and I kept designing ships with a different overall theme, which I came to call a central idea, which was a proposition, a statement, which was the center point of all the designs. The designs came from that central idea. on the Conquest, which comes to mind right away, I decided that the central idea would be the Impressionist painter, so that every room on the ship, in one way or another, related to a particular Impressionist painter. Matisse, Renoir, Gauguin, that he was post-Impressionist, but I threw him in. And it allowed me and Ted allowed me the great artistic freedom to do it. You know, when I would finish a design and I would go and show it to him in his office, and I didn't make renderings and, beautiful, presentations, because at that time, especially, I was basically one person. And I just didn't have the time to do it. It was, my job was doing the drawings necessary to give to the shipyard for them to build it. But in the way I did drawings, all the elevations, plans, and so forth were a rendering in a sort of way. You could look at the drawing, not like the normal blueprint, especially a CAD drawing, which, shows everything, but it gives you no feeling of expression. Whereas my drawings actually gave you a feeling. When a subcontractor got the drawing first, began looking at it, and they were all hand drawn, not with the machine or with CAD, and which I was very proud of, all to scale, good architect in that sense. And having that freedom to just sit down with a blank piece of paper in front of you and start drawing. It was intimidating, it was scary, but it was, these are the things that give you the juice and make you, want to do your job.
So Joe, you mentioned the word freedom, which had to have come from Ted Arison. Reflect on working for Ted and later his son, Mickey, during the time you started with Carnival until 2011, when Carnival had gone from fledgling cruise line to the largest in the world.
Yeah, wow. Again, just amazing. Ted was a guy that he was an engineer by training, and he had and his family was in shipping. So he had I would say the heart and soul of someone who really appreciated ships. And he also had this sensitivity to art. He liked it. He wasn't an artist, but he definitely admired it. He just gave me carte blanche. I think he saw me as an artist and saw that the work I was doing was a type of art, and that's not something that he should get involved in. That he let me, set the tone, define the product, create the product, and in fact work with the shipyard and be his right hand and his sensibility that I was given the power to pretty much do everything. In from designing it to getting it built and getting it done and so forth, and enjoying it once it was over with.
Did he ever tell you no?
Only once. I don't know how many public rooms I designed, but hundreds. And as I said earlier, I would do almost a cursory presentation to Ted to show him, what it was all about, and he would look. He would nod and understand it. And I believe he did understand it. I believe he had a really good sense of what the drawings were and so forth. But Ted was a superstitious guy. And I guess that's his shipping background. And I had designed, it was in the heyday of disco, the Bee Gees and Gloria Gaynor and all of them, which was a lot of fun, of course. So at the time there was, I think it was a Bee Gees song, perhaps, Disco Inferno. You heard all the time.
Tramps. It was the Tramps.
The Tramps. Okay. Thank you. I'm not a musical expert. And I thought, well, this would be a real interesting idea to create for a disco on a cruise ship. So I designed it like it was in Hades.
It was in Hades, as in hell.
Yes, Hades, not Haiti. And I made this dance floor that was going to be basically a polished stainless steel grill work. And below the grill work, it'd be glass, so you could dance on it. You wouldn't have to worry about the holes of the grill. But below the grill was going to be a simulated fire, coals and red, and cast red light on the people dancing. I thought it was a great idea. And Ted loved the idea, but he didn't want to put anything on a ship that denoted fire in any way, shape, or form. That's the number one safety concern on a ship. In fact, Of all the rooms that I designed, the hundreds of rooms, that's the only one that I had to change. And it had nothing to do with the design, all to do with superstition. And then Ted basically retired from active running of the company and so forth. And Mickey, his son, who had been, Mickey started off working in the purser's office. And so Mickey knew the business from the ground up. Nothing like working with people, working with, customers and so forth to, have a different kind of understanding about what the business is all about. But Mickey took the company to a new level. Mickey saw the potential for the company to grow. Ted was, they bought Holland America. Mickey was getting more and more involved, and they bought Holland America. And then they bought Costa. And this was all Mickey's doing. He, as I said, bringing it to a new level. Ultimately, one day, and this is an interesting story, Royal Caribbean was on the verge of buying Princess Cruises, which was, big company, big competitor of Carnival and Royal Caribbean. That really bugged Mickey. And Mickey, we were in Venice and we were going to dinner on a water taxi. And he said to me, Joe, I'm gonna buy this company. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to buy this company. And he made it his personal charging cavalry position and went out and talked to stockholders and talked to the company and ultimately sold them on, instead of selling to Royal Caribbean, to sell it to Carnival. It was an amazing story, and he did it. And this was again Ted's genius was taken to a new level with Mickey's genius. They're two different kinds of people, but Mickey was more, I would say, certainly more appreciative of my work. Not that he got involved, but he did things for me that allowed me to live a better life. I'll say that. And, so it was great. It was great having, to have the confidence of someone you're working for in a big way was just mind blowing, really.
Now, I know that for the most part, you stopped working directly with Carnival Cruise Line in 2011. You designed many wonderful ships. You were an entrant in the Guinness Book of World Records for one of those ships. But talk about the most memorable event or aspect of your career at Carnival.
It's hard. It's very hard, actually impossible to go to one point. I mean, certainly the greatest moment is when Ted gave me the first job and said, "You're going to do this." And that launched me on a career. But it was the whole career is the point. Very interesting. Ted was in a wheelchair by then. He was really not doing well, and we were in Helsinki. I think we had just gone on a ship or looked at something. It was rainy. It was cold, and Ted looked up to me and he said, "Joe, I'm glad it was you." And boy, that meant so much to me, because Ted was sort of a father figure in that respect. And that was probably personally the most amazing thing. That's it's a Hollywood ending, so to speak. And to be part of that, to be, he discovered me on a bar stool in Schraff's drugstore, and then at the end of his career, he in just a few words in a sentence, it was just an amazing compliment isn't even the right word. It was so much more than a compliment, because it was just a human connection and an appreciation expressed in a way that I could understand, and it just moved me. Another high point, as everyone knows, is involved ships. The ships are named, and certainly in those days, the ships were named by women. And they had some very interesting people do it. It was always fun to meet them and so forth. And then the next new ship was getting close to completion, and it was going to be delivered. And the naming was going to be in New York at one of the famous old piers that the United States and the France and so forth had docked on. And one day, the head of the sales department, Morris Lapidus, called me and said, "Joe, do you think Jean, my wife, would be interested in naming the Fascination?" I couldn't talk. I was just so stunned that came up, and I said, "I'm sure she would do that." And when that call was done, I went over and went to Jean, and I basically couldn't talk, and then said Carnival called me, and they want you to be the godmother of the fascination. And wow, and so it came to pass, and then we're up in New York, and in this famous place that was exuding history of passenger ships from the early 20th century. Jean had the godmother traditionally gives a little speech and then releases the champagne bottle. And Jean's speech was so heartwarming that because she wasn't some celebrity that was just brought in to name the ship as an honor. She knew it. She knew it from the ground up, so to speak, or the keel up, I should say. And she gave an amazing, wonderful speech, which, again, the captain especially and people from the shipyard who built the ship were so appreciative of. And I was just on cloud nine. I was so proud of her. And then the champagne bottle went, and it smashed as it should have. And, the hoopla started. And that certainly was a different kind of high point for me, but certainly one of the top couple that my career had, and it always will be. There was a couple pictures of that in my house in the office from that time, and it was just amazing.
And in the joy of cruising again, by the way.
Yeah.
So Joe, in 2000, Carnival Corporation acquired Italy's Costa Cruises. You designed Costa's first new ship following the acquisition. Talk about that and talk about what it was like to work with Costa over the next 14 years.
It was for me, again, the next step. When I wasn't just given the job, I had to make a pitch to the head of Costa to, so that he could say yes or no. Now, when we first started working on the ship, there was no head of Costa. They were looking for a new CEO. I did an orientation cruise on one of their ships and spoke to the officers and particularly the hotel manager, to find out what their thinking about the ship was. And that had a profound effect on all of us. Up until that point, whenever they built a new ship, they never asked the crew anything. The owner talked to whoever was doing the design work, and they put it in, and then the ship was just handed over to a crew, and then, okay, here it is, go with it. And they had all sorts of interesting ideas. Number one, Italians love to dance. You got to have a big dance floor because Italians love to dance, and we don't have a big dance floor on any of these ships. And so I took that to heart, and lots of other things that they had said. And then they Costa headhunted and found Pierluigi Foschi, who came from the elevator industry, had nothing to do with cruise ships. But he was a wonderful guy, is a wonderful guy. And again, an amazing sensitivity to art. He was Italian, but he was a very, very sophisticated, wonderful, sensitive man. And so it came time for me to meet him and tell him why I think that I should do the ship. And we had a meeting at his office, and I think it's fair to say we just hit it off. And he gave me the green light and the carte blanche to do the designs. And then when they were done, he was so appreciative, and he got it, he understood it, and we had an amazing synergy, and that just continued until the tragedy of the Costa Concordia, which had a profound effect on all of us. And, in my time working in Costa, not the least of which was spending a lot of time in Venice, my favorite city in the world, and, eating fantastic food and staying in fantastic hotels that was all paid for by someone else. And not only that, they paid me to do it. So it was, dreamland, fabulous experience.
Now, many cruise aficionados know about your work with Carnival and Costa, but you also had a significant part in Carnival Corporation subsidiaries Holland America Line and Cunard. Talk a little bit about that.
When Carnival bought Holland America, very strange dynamic that was there. They were a very interestingly managed company, and they the top people sort of took the attitude that Holland America bought Carnival rather than what actually happened. And so they were going to. So it was decided they needed a new ship. The Rotterdam was old, and they needed something new. So a contract was written to build these ships in Italy. First of which was the Statendam, and they gave me 3 rooms to design. The 2 rooms, the main lounge and the disco, but they gave me the opportunity to meet with the Dutch architects, to talk to them with the shipyard, to bring in the way I work with shipyards, to get them to do what you want, to not accept stuff that they would tell you that you can't do this or it's too expensive. I knew how to negotiate all that. It was a long learning experience where at the beginning, shipyards thought, well, here's this guy, American, never did ships before, or did very few, and he doesn't know anything. So we'll tell him you can't do this, you can't do that, it's too expensive, whatever. Well, I learned how to counter all those discussions because, first of all, I'm smart, had a lot of experience as an architect, not with ships, but I knew building. And, so it got to a point in that regard where shipyards no longer tried to fool me and so forth, and understood that, first of all, I had the confidence of the owners, and I had the wherewithal to make these kind of decisions and make it work. And what was to the shipyard's advantage was that I could make decisions. I didn't have to go back to the company and say, could we do this, could we do that, or should we do this, should we do that, costlier or whatever, because I worked in that regard. So I tried to inject that expertise and method of doing something into Holland America immediately. So they didn't, they were messing around with details, and the shipyard would say, "Oh, this is too expensive. This doesn't meet the standard," and I was able to counter that attitude as I had learned to do, and made that make that work for them, so that I could then just concentrate on designing the theater and the disco for these ships, and it was a good, it worked very well. But the Holland America hated me. They didn't, I was Carnival, and they hated the idea that Carnival bought them, and it really is kind of amazing. So we had but they, in the end, they, I think, had some appreciation for what I did, because I did some really beautiful work for them. So, and then Cunard.
Let me interrupt, Joe. Go back to Holland America. Yeah. It was several ships, right? Not just the Statendam.
No, Statendam, Maasdam, Rijndam, and I think there was a 4th one. On the 4th one, all I did was the theater. Now I don't. Now it's hard to remember. But okay. But they couldn't object. Their executive couldn't object hard enough to throw me off the job. So then Cunard came along, and they and Ted, and especially Mickey, wanted to. By the way, that was Cunard who came, I think, also with the Royal Caribbean deal that Mickey managed to swing in his direction, and they wanted to build a liner. Not a cruise ship, but a liner, and along the lines of the Queen Mary, the QE2, Queen Elizabeth, and the QE2. And, they were working with the French, with Chantier de Atlantique, and they were developing this GA for that ship. And Mickey was in charge of that, and he was looking at it. And again, Mickey didn't have I don't believe the plan, drawing, ability to analyze like Ted had. And I think Ted had the engineering background, and that's why. But anyway, something wasn't sitting right with him, the way the ship was laid out. And he asked me to get involved and solve some of the problems that the ship had. So I was able to solve the circulation problems, making sure that people could find their way around, because the QE2, apparently, I've never been on that ship, but it was, again, one of these mazes. It was hard to find your way. You had to sort of know, and that's not conducive to a good cruise or a crossing of the Atlantic. So I fixed all that, And then here's this huge ship is being built, and there was no big spaces. So I created an atrium and a lobby for that ship, and didn't do any of the decorations, only the fixing of the general arrangement plan, and creating some excitement as a result of that, and the ability for passengers to move around the ship with ease and find everything and not wait till the last day of the voyage to discover something. And so that worked out, really, really well. And I actually had designed the profile of the ship, which is the exterior elevation of the length of the ship from stem to stern, was very, very much a copy of the QE2. And this ship was going to be the Queen Mary 2. And I thought, why don't we make a new profile? And I created a 3-funnel, more traditional looking profile. One of the funnels was going to be basically all glass and a restaurant, and only one of the funnels would be active, which is not unlike the Normandy. One of the funnels on Normandy of the 3 was a complete fake, had no use. And the people that ran Cunard they didn't like that idea. I thought it would have been fantastic, and Mickey liked it. But, again, the people from Cunard were the people that were running it, so he let them go with that. And it was somewhat of a disappointment, but that wasn't my bread and butter, where I had my heart, really. So I could live through that easily.
Not a lot of people know your role with Queen Mary, but you were recognized in a book about the construction. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. The Cunard hired John Maxtone Graham, who was a very well-known writer, a ship enthusiast on cruise ships. And so he was in charge of writing that. And he just gave me some, real compliments, calling out that in more detail what I've just said about my participation in the creation of the Queen Mary 2. And it was very, very humbling and nice to read that. And, when you see that in print, when you're appreciated, that is, that's a great feeling to have. And John definitely did that for me.
Now, you retired in 2014. You had a great line, and I won't ask you to name the gentleman who said it, but what was that line again? It kind of, I won't say it caused you to retire, but you knew it was time to retire. I'm not an architect, but
yeah. I didn't know anything. I don't know anything about interior design, but and then go ahead and make the inane, stupid, selfish comments that a whole team of his people were around who wouldn't give an opinion at all until he gave an opinion. Then they could give their opinions. So it was a bunch of yes people, not yes men, all around, and it was just it was humiliating.
Now, I find it fascinating that since you retired, you haven't cruised. Say a little bit about that.
If I went on a cruise, I would just be looking at things all the time. I couldn't enjoy it like a normal person anymore. It would be a busman's holiday and not a good one at that. And I said to myself, why do I want to let myself in for that? And haven't done it. And this designer that worked for me, Pettu Kumala, who's Finn, he now is the head of the interior design department for Carnival. And he wanted me to go see their latest ship, the Mardi Gras, the new Mardi Gras. And, to go to the naming and the dinner at night and so forth. And he really desperately wanted John and I to go. And I at first I said, yeah, I'll do it. But then as it came closer, I said, it's going to be like walking down that promenade again. Why do I want to let myself in for that? And I, and finally begged off and said, no, I'm not going to do it. And that's been in the back of, that's been my main reason for not going on a cruise. I've done 1 million, of course, and had a fantastic time. Mm-hmm. But I'm no longer a normal person in that regard. And I just didn't want to do it. There's so many other things that we wanted to do, other kinds of traveling, which we've done.
While you haven't gone on any cruises, you and John have gone on some amazing travel adventures, a series of bucket list trips. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we fortunately, John is we're very much alike in the things that we like and the places we want to go, and I mean it's incredible. We've been married now almost 40 years, and it's still the same way. So we went to India for 3 weeks. So India and Nepal. We've been to China, which was unbelievable. We were there for a month, and we had the ability to do it the way we wanted to do it. We've been to Africa twice on safari, and that again, just these are all things that you just you dream about. You watch TV, you watch nature, and PBS shows, and David Attenborough, and these are all things that we dig, and we've just been doing it, and I would say we know how to do it. We've learned to be in control of the trip, not the trip being in control of you, and we've managed to do that, and it's just been fantastic. And I know you're going to ask me what's still on the bucket list to do, and
now, how did you know?
No, well, we're very much al fresco. When something hits us, and we say, what are we going to do? I mean, we've talked about going back to India, because when we went to India, it was a long time ago. India's changed a lot, and we were with a group, albeit a small group, 11 people with Abercrombie and Kent, which was a great travel group to go with. But when we went to China, I arranged our trip with Oddly Travel, and where we decided where to go. We decided we would have our own guide at each particular place we went to, and they would just seamlessly take us from one place to another. So when we were done in Beijing, for example, the guide that we had and their people would take us to the train station, put us on the train, and we'd go to whatever the next stop was, and there'd be people there, a new guide, new people, to take us off the train and take us to the hotel. Well, that's the way to do it. That's how we went to Africa. We've learned how to do these things, and we will continue doing it. And then this adventure that came about because of COVID, really, we bought this fabulous place in the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, and we've had that now for 2 years. We bought the house completely, fully furnished, and that gave us the opportunity to slowly, at our pace, do the changes that we wanted to the house to make it ours. And we're just pretty much done with it. And it's like a bucket list vacation to come up here. And we was just enjoying the hell out of it.
Well, one destination you didn't mention, it's on my bucket list. It's probably routine to you, but I have a photo of you in The Joy of Cruising Again. And I say, two icons of design. And it's a photo of you standing in front of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, no, it's all well worth it. We a year ago, pretty much exactly, we decided finally, okay, we're to go back to Europe. So we went to England, and we saw some friends there, and then we went to Italy, and we started off in Venice, and there's always something new to see, or to see something with better eyes than you saw it the first time. I mean, we went to the Baths of Caracalla for the first time in Rome. And it's something that John and I share, this love of history and culture.
Joe, it has been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. I sure hope that you come back on. I'd love to have you if you would.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's been great working with you. I like where you come from on your writing, and I enjoyed reading the book, although it was the manuscript, not the actual book. And it's you have a particular point of view, which is, as far as I know, not covered by anybody else, and it makes a story, an interesting story, in a way more interesting, especially for people that are cruise ship enthusiasts.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.